Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Return to the Realm, a rereaders podcast for the Realm of the Elderling series by Rob and Hobb. I'm Kayiu, and I'm here with Alex and Leah. I don't know why, it's like I can say it normally, but when my brain goes to the introduction, I just trip over it every time. I'm so sorry. I think it's just like now once I started pronouncing Elderlings properly, it was like, okay, time to give you a
You had
new
one thing wrong.
Mhm. But yeah, so this episode we're going to be covering Royal Assassin chapters 21 through 26. And this is always the most grueling part of the book. It's the penultimate section. So not looking forward to this, but I mean, just it's all downhill from here. So, great times. Also, a reminder, since this is a reader's podcast, there will be spoilers for not only this book, but also the entire series of 16 books. So, if you haven't read those books, finish them and then come back. And also, I've been following that advice since I've been a bit of a hypocrite, because unlike everyone else, I actually have not finished the Rainwild series. And on the plane ride back from India, I finished the first two books of Rainwild. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Soon I will not be a hypocrite when I make that spoiler warning. But yeah, let's get into it. So the first chapter in this section is Burrich. So basically, like the chapter says, Burrich returns from the journey with Verity, and it's kind of like this awkward moment where everyone's like, okay, wait, what's going on? How did you get injured? And Burrich is basically like, hey, yeah, we had none of the support that we thought we were going to get, and we were ambushed, heavily implying that they were ambushed by, like, not just random bandits, but like inlander soldiers. And so there's this underlying tension of like, okay, now we basically have no idea what's happening to Verity. The only connection is Fitz's skill. And so it's the first. We were already at worse, but now it's another step closer to worser, I guess.
Yeah.
And they seem to have known exactly where to hit Burrich too, because they hit him with an arrow in his old boar wound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was like, oh, it's like just bad luck that it happened again. Yeah. And I'm like, bad luck, Burrich. We know better than that.
See, okay, I'm that bitch because I totally thought like, oh yeah, that's so unfortunate. It couldn't happen to a better guy. And then now that you guys are mentioning it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
That's sketch as fuck.
Yeah.
There's no way that wasn't planned.
Mm-hmm. But wouldn't they simply aim for his head? Like,
well,
I feel like it's more believable if he's injured and then gets killed after. It makes it look more like a battle than if it was just like a straight up assassination of all of the people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Could also be like classic Regal being like, I'll leave one of them to come back. And they'll know not to mess with me.
Regal must be smarter than at least I have been giving him credit for, because this foiling of Verity is very organized. Like the fact that he thwarted every message saying that they were coming and somehow made planned for everyone to be inhospitable, and then there are all these organized attacks happening along the way too. Either he hired someone smarter than him to plan all this out, or he's a little bit smarter than I've been giving him credit for.
Well, I think it also doesn't help that Verity has to go through the inland duchies, who are already loyal to Regal, in order to get to the Mountain Kingdom, because I'm sure that he would have they probably don't even know. I'm sure that Regal had people intercept the messengers to the Mountain Kingdom saying hey, we're coming, can you prep for us? Mm-hmm. But you know that the way through the rest of the six duchies is not going to be an easy one for him.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not even sure he needs to be smart. He just needs to be ruthless. He just needs to be thorough. And I think it's a lot easier for him to be thorough now that he basically has the king's ear at all times. So he can basically just everything that goes out of the castle has to be approved by the king in some fashion. And with Regal effectively usurping that position, he can just be like, I'll pick up you, and you guys are not leaving. Cool.
Well, and Shrewd's like basically not doing anything anymore.
Shrewd is piece the fuck out.
Right. He's like basically non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that Shade would send messengers himself to like make sure that they had some like safe places to go. Unless he like really he like didn't think that Regal was that big of a threat that he would do something like that.
I think, yeah, it's also just Shade is fallible, and also I think we see that like lots of his resources are probably directed towards like the coastal duchies and the out islands, like trying to like keep in a reach there.
Yeah.
Because like I don't remember the section or an earlier one where like there's like a report of someone who like went to the out islands and was there on like Shade's behalf, kind of thing.
I think he went. I
Did
think
he go directly? Oh, I forget.
Yeah, do you remember when he was being super secretive with Fitz and like not telling Fitz, and he's like, yeah, I have to go, like I'm going on a trip for a while, I'll be back later. I'm pretty sure that's where he went.
Yeah,
Got you. Okay, that makes sense.
He also just at this point refuses to acknowledge that Regal could be bad. Like it's a later chapter, I think, but
it's not even that Regal isn't bad. It's also just like
I think it's how bad Regal is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's this chapter where Fitz literally says like, this is what I think's going on, and we know as rereaders that he's exactly right. And Shay's just like, there's a lot of holes in this plot you think is happening, and it's
I do not see it.
Yeah,
and like all of the holes can be explained by personality. Like like Shade is thinking it through as though it was his motivations, when it's like you're not. What if your enemy is irrational?
Yeah, he needs Burrich whispering in his ear. Regal doesn't play by the rules that we do. Regal doesn't play by any rules at all.
Like, yeah, Shade has just been in the castle too long. Like, there's like used to court intrigue rather than just like
plain old
like the straight up plotting and ruthlessness of the real world.
Treason.
Yeah, like the line that I picked out is like Fitz like says Shade would know what to do, and like despite everything and all of like Fitz like growing up and kind of having doubts, he still like blindly trusts Shade, and that kind of ends up being his and the kingdom's downfall. Again, like I say this like every episode for like the past 3 episodes, but as I keep reading, I'm like, Shade is literally the one thing standing in the way of Regal, and he does nothing. And it's all his fault. And I love you, Shade, but also I hate you so much. God.
Yeah, it's frustrating to read. Especially when you know like what's coming and you just want to reach into the book and grab Shade and shake him and be like, do something! Like, poison
Regal. I think the reason that like Fitz doesn't push Shade that much is like, he's like, oh, Shade is getting old. Like, okay.
Yeah, he's like
there's a line where like,
Grandpa, I can't.
The age was creeping up on Shade, and I'm like, haha, yeah, he's totally getting old. Ha ha ha. Meanwhile,
except he lives for 100 years.
Right. This is the chapter where Nighteyes gets it on with Molly, too. Just very
heading to the long list of like, Hobb, why must you do this? Did I have to read this with my own eyes?
Yeah, well, it's freaking... First it's Nighteyes, and then it's Verity, so everybody's using Fitz's body but him.
Right. And
I love how, like,
doing a better
Molly's
job.
like, wow, you were perfect and amazing, and I'm just like...
so pleased. Poor Fitz. He can't win at all.
Yeah. Also, speaking of Nighteyes, this chapter has probably the most iconic quote from the series. Fitz is like aghast that Nighteyes doesn't care about Verity, and then he's like, the other one is our king, and Nighteyes is like, your king? Wolves have no kings. And I love like that basically becomes like Fitz's like ideology, or like, because he's like, yeah, that is how I get my freedom. I become a wolf, and I no longer have my entire life beholden to a king.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's such like an iconic, whenever I think or I see lines from this trilogy, that always is included in the list. The wolves have no kings
Yeah.
line.
Scooting back to the intro of this chapter, it really just makes you realize how alone Patience is just in life in general. Like, she doesn't have any, like, blood relatives, as we can see, and the only family that she has is Fitz and Lacey, and, like, it makes me so sad. Like, she lost her parents, she doesn't have her husband anymore, all she's got is her adoptive son and her, like, servant best friend. Lady's maid.
Yeah, she eventually like warms up to like Kettricken, but like you can see how much like the effect of people's gossip has had on her like self-confidence and like her willingness to like reach out to other people, and also just like her
Yeah.
like she believes that everyone perceives her as like this essentially like crazy old lady. And like some
Yeah.
of them do. Like we definitely like later in the section, Lacey is like, "Oh, she's half crazy" or whatever. And at that, and you know, just adding on to the list of things in that section that I was ready to absolutely throttle Cook Sarah for. But yeah,
Right.
I think I said Lacey in the first half of that. No, Lacey's great.
Lacey would never.
Yeah, Lacey
No.
would never. Yeah, Patience just my entire mood is just Patience deserves better always.
Oh yeah. I feel bad
And then
for-
like all of Tawny Man, like just don't see her at all until the very, very end.
Yep.
And then we get like a smidge of her in Fitz and the Fool, and that's it.
Yeah, she's in like one chapter, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, Patience died.
Yeah.
Such
Is
a
there like a
bummer.
Patience Lacey novel or like short story, or did I just like
I-
dream that up for wanting it?
I think we all want that to happen.
I
Okay.
think
Have-
Hobb said she was working on something like that, but like, I've seen it in Reddit.
Yeah, me
I don't
too.
know, like, if that's true or where it's coming from, or
Fingers crossed.
yeah.
Yeah, speaking of Patience, I never noticed that Patience has like a little nickname for Burr. She's like, "Oh, Burr," and I'm like,
I saw that and I was like, oh my god, my heart.
Mm-hmm. And just like a Burr, he like even when you don't notice it, it's still like clinging on to you. That's a Burrich in a nutshell. He's just like always holding on to those connections with the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
One line that really struck out to me when Patience was like kind of taking care of Burrich in Fitz's room is this line that says, Lacey stepped back out of the way and Lady Patience knelt before the stable master. And it just struck me so hard because it was like, it went from informal of like Patience and Burrich and just like naming names and stuff like that. And then it kind of takes a step back, like Fitz takes a step back, I feel, and like sees it for what it is and is like this royal lady of the court who used to be the queen in waiting is like humbling herself to take care of this stable master of like the buckkeep. Like,
Yeah.
I just loved it so much.
Yeah, I noted that line as well because I was like, it was such like a distinct shift, like from the names to this, and I was like, I feel like sometimes like there's sort of like Fitz has these moments where he's just like looking in retrospect and has that like clarity. I think there's like you also noted like Fitz is like being like very nostalgic in this chapter. I think that's kind of like what prompted him to kind of have that shift in perspective or like phrase it that way.
I feel like this
Yeah, I think you're right.
this like portion where Patience is taking care of Burrich felt like it was foreshadowing them getting together again. But we obviously know that doesn't happen, so it made me wonder if like maybe that was her original direction and then she changed it, or if she's just like dangling a carrot to tease us.
I think
It's the
it
bait and
also
switch. Just
it
like
might also show like why it didn't work out. Like they could have tried to make it work again, but like their differences just kind of made it that like it never would have worked out. And so they kind of realized that they had made the right life decisions, even though Burrich should have found a nice wife to take care of him and stop him from drinking so much before Molly.
Yeah, I feel like Burrich would never be able to get past their like that line of Lady Patience and the stable master. Like
he
And
has
he
too
would
much of a
not.
sense of honor.
Do you know how bad he would want to clean her room all the time? His shit is so tidy all the time. Like, he would be itching to clean all her stuff. He would slowly try and clean stuff up, and that would be the source of all of their arguments. I have no doubt.
Yep.
But yeah, I didn't have anything else from this chapter.
Yeah, that was all I had too.
It was a pretty like short but sweet one.
I think the only thing left I have is just how cute it was that Patience is like so shy around Kettricken when we know both of them so well that like they would become best friends, and I just want her to open up. And like it's kind of really cute that she is shy at first, and then when she finds out that Kettricken's pregnant, like all bets are off and she just kind of opens up to become her regular self again.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot that bombshell was dropped this chapter.
Oh, yep. Kettricken's pregnant.
Mhm.
I think Kettricken reminds Patience so much of everything she's lost. Like, every child she's lost, her husband, her standing, her, like, former life. Like, so I think she's scared. Like, she's really shy, but I think she's also scared to, like, be around Kettricken because she's scared of those reminders.
Mhm. I think she
But I
kind of
feel
like
like
compares
Kettricken,
Kettricken to herself, and she's like,
yeah.
"Oh, this is the queen that everyone would have wanted or expected of me." And I feel like she doesn't like see the fact that people are also are like have gossip or like have doubts about Kettricken. She only sees Kettricken's positive points, which is very cute. I love that. But also
Well,
like Patience, please, some self-confidence.
we also see in the next book that Patience would have been a kick-ass queen because she takes Buckkeep under her wing and keeps it afloat and like holds down the fort while everyone else is gone doing like mountain stuff and magic stuff. You know?
Because yeah,
Yeah.
she's so much more practical than people give her credit for, and it's like there's this expectation that a queen needs to be like forward facing, and it's like no, a queen just needs to be like competent and keep things running. Like
And that's exactly what Patience is. Because I don't know, I just love her, and I wish that we saw more of her being the queen.
I agree.
like particularly
I just wish we saw more
she's
of
a
her in
good
general.
wartime queen, which is like weird to say because she's like one of the most like peaceful people in the series, but she has like that head on her shoulders that where she can like keep her cool and be like, okay, this is the thing we need to do, etc., etc.
And she uses her instincts, and I feel like she, like, instead of getting stuck thinking about, like, what's the right thing to do, how do I do this, like, she kind of knows from her, like, upbringing, and then just the way her mind works, she, like, doesn't have to pause and think things through. She kind of just goes on instinct, and that is what helps her, like, get through everything.
Okay, so next up we have chapter 23, Threats. Yeah, I don't know like anything specific that happens in this chapter other than like, oh man, stuff keeps getting worse. Oh boy, oh boy. So I think we can just like hop into it.
I think it's basically just kind of like a continuation of the last chapter. But this chapter really struck home to me for some reason. Like, how much Burrich has lost. Because, like, after, I mean, his whole sense of purpose in his life was being Chivalry's right hand man. And then he loses that when he's taking care of Chivalry's son. And then that's kind of his sense of purpose. And then Chivalry dies. And Fitz is like taken to the castle, and then he really just has like the stables, and now he doesn't even have the stables, and he's been injured twice in his leg in the line of fire, like defending the Farseers. Like he's lost his health and every sense of like livelihood and purpose he's had at this point.
Yeah,
And
he's being knocked
all he's
down
got is
station to
Fitz, and then
station.
Fitz fucking dies at the start of the next
Right.
book, and it's like, can you like it's no wonder that he was like drinking himself senseless at that point. And again,
He
like
has
if he
nothing.
didn't have like the sense of purpose of like I need to protect Molly and Nettle, like
Mhm. Like he doesn't
there's
even
no
have Vixen anymore.
Yeah, he
like
lost.
yeah, I think if he didn't have Molly to protect, I feel like Burge would have made his own trip to Tradeford, like straight up.
Yeah.
I could see that. But then he would have gotten himself killed for sure. Because
Or
I
I
don't
see
think that
him
he would
just
have done it in a subtle way.
yeah, or
Because he's
just
like, I've got nothing else to live for.
Like he might have been more competent than Fitz because like he's close to the skill, so he can't get messed up by Will and all of them.
That's true.
Though he doesn't have the assassin skill, so he just lumber in with an axe.
He'd chop Regal's head off.
Mm-hmm.
I could see Burrich being a lumberjack. If all else fails, like stable master no more, just be a lumberjack. You can do it.
yeah, he has Paul Bunyan vibes.
And he's handsome. Like I feel like all lumberjacks in like the 21st century are now like these buff, very handsome guys. Like Burrich is very cut out to be a lumberjack.
Burge could definitely pull off some flannel.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
But yeah, the line which just like killed me is like a man can die of failure, Fitz, and I'm like, you're not a failure. You just like life has failed you. Like, come on now.
Yeah, life is not kind to Burrich.
Mm-hmm. Burrich is not kind to Burrich. Burrich needs to be kinder to Burrich.
Yeah, that's true. I think the one thing that like I hated the most in this chapter is that they like trapped Fitz in Buckkeep, and I forgot that that happened like this early on, and I am not ready for what else is to come at all.
Yeah, trapping Fitz in like Buckkeep feels like a classic Regal move because it is just petty. It tips your hand. It lets Fitz know that like Fitz says, the noose is tightening, and it doesn't really do anything more than that. But again, it's Regal. He's just like, why don't I push the limits a little more? Just because I can, and no one will ever say no to me.
It does
Well,
though because
if he
sorry.
suspects that Fitz is witted, then he probably assumes that like his animal's not in like Buckkeep Castle.
Fair. Is this before or after the attack on Justin and Serene? Because I think if
this is after.
okay,
Yeah.
in that case they know it's a wolf, so they know it can't be like here. Okay.
I think that Regal was playing a game by doing this because the attitude of the entire keep towards Fitz shifts when he's not allowed anymore. Like all of a sudden he's like, I wasn't a popular person to be seen speaking to. Whereas before this happened, he's like little princeling and he's friends with everybody.
And everybody loves him.
Yeah, like I think like it's such a power move because the second he isn't allowed outside, like he's ostracized. And it's like this subtle way of turning everybody against him, because if Regal just went right to imprisoning him and skipped that, there would have been a lot more outcry, whereas by the time he does that, really the only people complaining are Brondi, or the only person complaining is like Brondi and Patience.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I just don't give Regal credit for like predicting that would happen. I guess this is just where I land at. But again, I could very much be underestimating Regal. I just feel like
I
Regal
think
did it because he's like, wouldn't it be funny if like I did this, or like just like, and then it ended up having this ripple effect of like people start to speculate of, okay, why isn't he allowed out of the keep? Weird.
well, I think that the court is Regal's strong suit, and it always has been, and I think it's been like at least Verity's weaker point. So he knows how to use and manipulate the court more than he knows how to use and manipulate anything. So if he's going to get someone to, like, if he wants something done and, like, if he wants to sway the opinions of people, all he has to do is just, like, babble on a little bit in court and throw a couple parties and whisper a couple things into, like, the most gossipy people's ears, and then it spreads throughout the whole castle like wildfire.
Yeah, I wish we got like more direct descriptions of like what Regal is like at parties, which it feels like Shade or Fitz should like be eavesdropping on. I feel like they're
Yeah.
really dropping the ball on that.
I am constantly thinking whenever Fitz is like, yeah, I slunk away, like I kept my distance from all these people. Those are the people that he should be keeping an eye on the most, and he avoids them so badly in this book. And I'm like he probably could have avoided a lot if he had just stayed and listened and like heard more of the gossip or like snuck around. Like if he had used his little spy talents, like I think some things could have been a little bit better.
Speaking
Or
of
if
spying,
he-
that could be, I didn't consider this before, that could be a reason they didn't let him out of Buckkeep, right? Because they also accuse Molly of spying for him when going down to Buckkeep Town. So it could be that it's like he doesn't want him to get information from the wider world as to what's going on.
Yeah, because he'll sound the alarm like he did last time for Neat Bay.
He doesn't want a voice to be present to counteract what he's whispering to Shrewd. Okay, I didn't consider that perspective, but then that makes it a lot more calculated. Oh yeah, speaking of like Neat Bay and stuff, like the intro of this chapter where they're talking about how like they took the emeralds back and then just all communication broke down and everything went to shit. It was like on one hand it's incredibly tragic, on the other hand by this point of the book I'm so numb to it where I'm like, I mean, yeah, I mean we could have stopped this. You could have stopped this, Shade. Like we could have all stopped this. We could be doing something, but then we just did. But then Kettricken's the only one to do something, and like even she's limited in her means. It's just like, oh well.
Everyone's still waiting for Verity to just come back with the Elderlings and save them all. Like,
Yeah, everyone has their
I love
hands
how none
tied
of
by
them
their
have a backup plan.
sensibilities, and I'm like, just get over it.
Nobody
Right.
else has a backup plan. Like, Shade should have a backup plan. He should know that there's a great possibility that, like, Verity doesn't survive, or the Elderlings say no and don't come and help. Like,
Or that they don't even exist. Like, they don't
Exactly.
even know that they exist for sure.
what was Shade gonna do if Verity came back and was like, yep, it's just me still?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he's planned at all. I think he's too busy worrying about Shrewd and taking care of Shrewd to think about the, like, future of the kingdom at this point. Because I don't think he's, like, yeah, he's looking out for Neat Bay, but I don't know if he's, like, really looking out for any more. Like, I
It's
think
always the
he
funny thing of
focused
like,
most of his attention inside the castle rather than, like, out to the Six Duchies.
we're like in this trilogy, like so much of how Chade believes that like the kingdom operates is just like as long as there's a monarch, things will be fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is
We
also
see
kind of
that
funny because it's kind of what the Fool says, except the monarch can't be regal.
Well, to
Yeah.
be fair, Shade's been raised up till this point to just follow orders. Like,
Yeah.
he's smart and he has spies and stuff, but he's gathering information. He's not making decisions based on the information. And all
Yeah,
of a
he
sudden,
literally. Oh, go
right,
ahead.
with Shrewd, like, being incapacitated, basically, Shade's the only person, and he's not, like, used to having to call any shots.
Well, and he
Was he like
still doesn't
taught
because
this? Like, was there like? Do we know that there was like an assassin master for him? Just like
He says so.
yeah, he
in the
has
last book.
he had a mentor, he said, but like
okay,
he tried to keep it quiet. Also, he tells Fitz in this section like assassins are tools. You're not supposed to make your own decisions. So like I feel like he's still even acting like that and like thinking that way.
Yep.
Even though he knows that like the real king is not really there to give orders anymore.
Right.
I missed the part about him having like a mentor, but I kind of wondered if it was like self-imposed in the sense of like after his accident, because he keeps talking about like have faith, have faith, have faith, and I was wondering if like maybe he just like needed something to cling on to, and that was just like the infallibility of the monarchy. Like okay, I can like I can't do anything else, but as long as I can protect the monarchy, they then we're good. Because I believe that that's the best way for the kingdom. That's the best thing I can do. Or like that's the one thing I can do, kind of thing.
That makes me wonder if Shade became an assassin before or after his accident. Like, do you think that he was subtly
He says
doing that?
in the last book when Fitz has to kill for the first time, he tells Fitz that he was younger than Fitz was. And Fitz was like 13.
Oh
He says,
yeah.
I was younger than you the first time I had to do it. So I think he just became quiet assassin after his accident. So
Yeah.
that he could be more of like a spy too.
Weird. I can't like reconcile the image of like foppish dandy Shade also being an assassin.
Well, he does it in Tawny Man too.
Yeah, but I'm
And
mostly he
it's the best
describes himself
because
as
it's the
like
least
vainer
expected.
than regal, and if he's like vainer than regal and like that's stupid, like I can't imagine. I guess Fitz is very stupid and still gets to be an assassin. So you know what? Never mind. I retract my complaints.
I don't think Fitz is as stupid as we all think he is. He just doesn't show us that he's smart. Because there was like something
smart.
like he said something very like insightful in this section that I was like, "Oh, wow, Fitz, like that was really smart." And then I'm like thinking and I'm like, I need to give Fitz so much more credit because he's actually a really smart guy. But he doesn't let us think that he's smart because he's like, "Oh, I'm dumb, I'm ugly, like nobody likes me."
Mm-hmm.
But he's
I think
actually
if
a
we think of
smart,
it in terms of like D
lovable,
and D stats,
handsome
he's got
guy.
like oh yeah, sorry. If we think of it in terms of D and D stats, he's got high intelligence, but like zero wisdom.
Yeah, that's true.
He'd be the type of person that was like really good at like he would get like a 4.0, but then he'd be stupid with like life things.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But I feel like Burrich is trying to teach him better.
Yes.
I think that he knows how to fix things and he knows how to talk to people. He knows how to do all these things. I think he just like his confidence, like he lacks confidence. And if he had confidence, I think that like all bets would be off and he would end up being the king.
I think he doesn't like apply his skills enough too because we see how easily he can like manipulate Cook Sarah to get information out of her when he wants to and like what he did with Lady Grace in the last book like but he's so focused on Molly and Regal in this book that he's not getting the court on his side the way he should be.
Yeah.
To like
Yeah,
like
with the irony of like the Molly thing being like if he just picked up a trade or like expanded his horizons a little bit, he could secure a future for himself and Molly.
right.
Yeah.
And Patience even says that like, what do you have to offer her? And then Fitz is like, fuck all, and it's gonna stay that way.
Yeah, I'm not going to do anything about it.
Fitz really is the trust fund baby.
Yeah. Whoops.
Speaking of Molly, she gets like attacked in this chapter. And
Which I completely forgot. It must have been
yeah,
terrifying.
I feel really bad for her because like I understand where both of them are coming from in this argument, where Fitz is like, I can't, like, this is happening because you're around me, but then at the same time, he's all she has. Like,
Yeah.
she's lost her father, she doesn't have her family nearby her in Silt Bay, she doesn't have any friends that we can see of. She really just has Patience and, like, Regal whispering in her ear and manipulating her to think he's a good guy. So she feels like all she has is Fitz, and then he's like, no, I'm not going to see you anymore. Like, that would feel like abandonment when that's all you have. And then she's like, we should be standing up to him because otherwise he'll just keep beating us down. And she has a point there, too. It's like, poor Molly.
Yeah, I think it's hard because Molly's reacting. They both are reacting out of fear, but the way that they react is so different, and hers is based on like the trauma that she suffered from her dad, so she thinks that this is the way to kind of solve all things that you're afraid of, or like people who threaten you. And then Fitz has more knowledge of the court and the sneaky, subtle ways that people can threaten and harm you, so he knows best how to take care of it. But I don't think that Molly sees enough of Fitz like in a court setting to know that he kind of knows best in this situation.
She also doesn't know he's an assassin.
That's true.
Yeah, I think it's also like Fitz has his own like, well, you can call it upbringing or trauma, but like where again it's like you said, Shade has molded him. Shade and Shrewd have molded him into a tool. So he's so passive,
Yeah.
and like the correct answer is like a middle ground where it's like Fitz says, like take your time, buy like get your resources, talk to people, find out more. But then, like, use that information, like Molly is saying, because Regal gets away with everything because no one does. Like, she hits the nail on the head with like, once someone knows you're afraid of him, you're never safe from that person. They'll keep going to see how far you'll obey them in your fear, and it's like, in fact, like keeping Fitz from going down to Buckytown is literally an example of that. But Fitz is like, no, actually doing something about this problem, I can't. Shade told me not to, and that's the word of God. And it's like, nah.
That was all I had for that chapter.
Yeah, I don't have
Pretty
anything
short
else
one.
either. I had two notes, and one was just, I'm not ready to look. I'm not looking forward to what's coming. It's already happening. Like,
I looked ahead at this portion of our reading to like the end of chapter 26 because I was like, I need some time before I can like jump back into Fitz being tortured. Like, do I have some time still? And when I looked at the end, I was like, oh, thank God, it's not this section yet.
Can we just skip it? Like,
I need to.
is that allowed?
I need to
Because
brace
I
myself.
don't want it.
I mean, I don't even know that there's much to talk about other than like, damn, that boy can sure take a punch.
Right.
Like,
And Fitz is getting punched in the face some more, okay?
I guess the one notable thing is like, he broke his nose, and that will stay with him for the rest of his life.
Now his nose is broken.
I guess I had two more notes for this chapter where they're talking about like in Birch's room, they're talking about like who knows that Kettricken is pregnant, and Fitz mentions the fool, and like Birch is surprised, and he's like, well, at least that's one tongue that won't go wagging. And I thought that was really funny, given that like the archetype of a fool or like a jester is like someone who's constantly talking and just like, and we see that like the fool does that, and so it shows that Birch like knows the fool to some degree and is like, yeah, this is a trustworthy person, which I thought is like a really like just like interesting way of conveying that, where it's just like an offhand run, like, yeah, we can trust the fool.
Something that just struck me when you said that is how similar this fool is to a lot of the fools in Shakespeare, because I was an English major, so like I read all these things. But in Shakespeare, most of the times the fool is the only one who's like speaking truth and like trying to call people out for what they're doing or what they're saying. And it feels like the fool is the only person who can do that here as well, because people just write him off. Well, at least in Shakespeare, people just write them off as, oh, it's just a fool. He's like mad or whatever. And here it seems like the fool, he's not constrained by society or like the norms of court. So he's allowed to be blunt and say, but not like blunt, but like say all these things that he's thinking and that everyone else is thinking in, at least in court, but not really in court anymore. But I think that he used to be able to wag his tongue and make fun of people for things that like I think other people were thinking too.
It also reminds me of the wit in the Stormlight books by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if you guys have read those. I've only read the first one, but when I was reading it, I was like, this character, like, he had to have read Realm of the Elderlings, because this character is basically the fool. And, like, I've read Shakespeare, but I haven't read, like, a ton, so I never put together that was a theme with the fools and those plays and stories as well. But yeah, also reminded me of the character, the wit, in those books.
And the fact that character's name is the Wit, like,
it kind of made me a little bit mad. I was like, this is so similar. Like, how is
Hobb should sue.
And I know I saw like a clip of an interview where he mentioned her being like an influence. So I was like, he definitely like consciously or subconsciously mimicked this character. But again, I've only read the first book, and I think there are like 5. So maybe later on he becomes like way different. But I was getting very Fool vibes from the first book.
I should check it out, because Sanderson is one of those authors who I've heard a lot about. Has an extensive, what did you call it? Bibliography?
Yeah.
But like, I just have never read any of his books.
I know, same. I feel like I need to.
Pacing wise, it's similar. I think it's similar to this. Like the first book, I listened to it. I listened to audiobooks when I walk my dog, and it was like 36 hours long. And I would say the last like 3 or 4 hours were when it like really got into it. Yeah, like it was a lot of like background and build up, and then it kind of got going. And a friend of mine had warned me. She was like, the first book is super dense, like super world buildy, and then it kind of gets going. But that's exactly how Hobb's books are. Like her books are so character driven that it's like and then everything happens at the end. Like
I've also heard that like Sanderson likes his magic systems, so I've heard that like he takes a while to like set those up.
It's also very like, I believe he's Mormon, and it's very, once I knew that, I could kind of, with the like religious systems in it, I was like, this is Mormon-y.
Okay.
So I was like a little bit turned off whenever I think I hear that like religion is a big influence or theme, I have bad experiences with the religion in my actual life, so I'm always a little bit like, I like it less now.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, and it's very easy for it to like slip into moralizing rather than just thematic.
Yes.
But
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Not to say that being a religious and an author is a bad thing, but
Right.
definitely have to like be careful
it's just
how
like
the themes come through.
Right, personal experiences, and then like when you see it reflected, it can be off-putting to some people.
Definitely. Anyways, this is a podcast about Robin Hobb and not Brandon Sanderson, so for now. I cannot
Tangent.
promise that when we
Sorry.
finish like Fool's Fate or whatever, that we don't immediately segue into Brandon Sanderson to cope. But
Or we just start back at the beginning. We should just cycle through and make this last forever.
I mean, honestly, that's on brand. Just like history goes in cycles, so too will this podcast.
Yes.
Okay, my last note for this chapter is the Fool has warned Fitz like 3 times not to say Shade's name, and Fitz almost name drops it here in front of Molly. Like,
I know.
I'm
What the
honestly more
fuck?
surprised that it doesn't come back to like bite them in the future. Like I would like if I was like writing this, I would be like, man, I'm so gonna like have Fitz accidentally expose Shade here. Especially when they have that thing about like Lord Bright like knocking around and checking. Like I feel like all of those threads could have converged into Shade being exposed.
Well, and you know that of course Molly's the one that Fitz would say something to because he keeps his mouth and like his lies so tight to his chest when he's talking to Molly that like his biggest secret would be the one that he accidentally slips about because he like sometimes forgets that it's a secret.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I guess with that, anything else for this chapter? Okay, so chapter 24, Need Bay, and this one is a doozy. This one is, I think, by far the longest chapter in this section. So, Shade gets news of the largest red ship attack yet. 5 whole red ships attacking Neat Bay. And through Fitz, rouses the castle, and despite Regal's attempt to head them off, they do manage to get to King Shrewd, who orders them to go to Neat Bay. So Kettricken, Burrich, Fitz, all ride off to Neat Bay. They fight off the red ship raiders after a grueling siege, and it's kind of the first large victory against the red ships. And it's also one of the first big battles we've had in this book since Antler Island.
Yeah, but I feel like this one we get more description, at least. Like, I feel like Fitz doesn't completely close us out of the fighting. Like, I feel like that's kind of what happened at Antler Island. Like, he closed everyone off, including the readers.
Okay, he also does say in this section, like, that was the last thing I remembered of the battle.
That's true.
Like,
I forgot about that.
But like, I think that Nighteyes being there means that we get like flashes of like this happened, or like I had impressions of
Nighteyes
this.
is telling Fitz this is what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's more build-up too before like actual intense fighting time because they like clear out the raiders near the ships and then they're kind of like camping and blocking. They're like forming a blockade to keep the raiders, to try to like starve them out, and then they kind of break through, and that's when the fighting really starts. So it's like there's more little battle and then like wait around and little battle and wait around before the like really intense fighting, at which point Fitz blocks us out. So
Yeah.
we have more, and then we have like Burrich there to give perspective of what happened while Fitz was kind of like blocked off. So there's like more perspective than we got in Antler Island.
Mm-hmm. The chapter starts off on a really cheery note with, like me, the folk of Buckkeep were waiting in suspense for disaster to come to their doorsteps. Might as well have said, like you, dear reader, everyone in this book is just like ready for shit to go down.
Well, and Hobb talks about the pocked man in the intro. And I feel like that has to be, like, she talks about it, how seeing the pocked man is, like, a bad omen, and, like, only death and destruction is going to come and follow him. And even seeing it in, like, plays shows that, like, you're about to witness a tragedy, so kind of, like, brace yourself. So you know that her mentioning that in this intro section is like a warning to, I took it as a warning to the readers as well, not just people in world.
Yeah, I definitely missed that on my first read through, but that's a good shout. It's like this little like meta like nod.
She's like, brace yourself because shit gets worse.
Mm-hmm. This is like kind of in a weird in between like the start of the chapter and when like shit starts going down. But there's a line which like I noted where it's like I wished Molly was there to scold me for being drunk, and it's a line that like really like got me for some reason because it's like it's like really vulnerable in a weird way for Fitz because I feel like he never like expresses this kind of stuff, and it's like yeah like because normally he would be like I would not want her to see me like this, but it's like I know that she wouldn't like that I'm like this, but I would want her to be here even for
Yeah,
that.
at least she's here with me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Even if she's yelling at me, at least she's here.
It was weirdly vulnerable and in that way sweet, and so like, yeah, it was just like it just hit me as a strange kind of sweet, and I always love those kind of like, oh, this is mildly fucked up but also cute moments in books. So,
There's a lot of those in Fitz and Molly's relationship.
oh yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, honestly, you'd be hard pressed to find ones that are like on the more mild side, but
Yeah.
definitely, if you cut out that adjective, you can definitely find moments like that.
One description I really liked in this chapter was Burrich knows that Fitz has this bond with a wolf, and Fitz says, "Nighteyes," I admitted quietly, rendering the image of his name into human words. And I just really love that description because it's like, yeah, his mom wouldn't name him Nighteyes because that's like a human phrase, but it would be like the image of that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time where we really see the perspective where he's like rendering the image of the word
Oh,
into human, rendering the image of the name into human words. Like, I just thought that was such a cool way to describe the way an animal would like think about their name.
Yeah, I hadn't
sure.
even thought about it until she did that and like said that.
Right. Yep.
Because we just get the human rendering of his name throughout reading. There's no way to even describe it. And then to hear that like what we're thinking isn't exactly right because it's like in human language is
Right.
really, really cool.
Yeah, and speaking of Nighteyes, I just love like how gushy and like amused he is when meeting Burrich. Like he's like, "Oh, this stuck up old whatever," or like not even that, but he's just like, I think he's just really amused by how like stiff Burrich is, and
Yep.
so so like Burrich is like a wolf, and Nighteyes meanwhile is like doing mental cartwheels, like you know I am.
He's like,
Like
duh.
And I
He's
love
like,
the
"I know
description
you
of him
can
like
hear
tongue
me."
lolling and stuff.
Yes.
He's so goofy.
And this is where we hear Heart of the Pack for the first time. And literally in my notes, I had Heart of the Pack and then like the cry face emoji. But I saw
my God,
that
I put
Alex
those
had
in
exactly
mine.
that in her notes too. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, same Heart of the
I was like,
Pack.
oh my God. And the dogs love him so much, and that's what they call him. Like, my
I
freaking
don't know
heart.
how Burrich could ignore that. If a bunch of dogs were calling me that, I would give in all. I would just like
I
lay on
would
the
be
floor and be like,
crying
yes,
all the time.
I am Heart of the Pack.
It's
Love me.
yes. Oh my God. And like the fact that none of those dogs wanted to leave their heart of the pack and fucking Regal sent them all away. Like those poor dogs. And he doesn't even have like any of Vixen's pups. Like he doesn't have anything to remember. Like Birch has nothing anymore. Going back to what we said before, like even Vixen's offspring are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Or Burrich.
And it's like, obviously Burge loved the dogs so much. Like we hear how much he cares for them and stuff. So it's like, Burge just like takes it like a champ. Honestly, like
I think he drinks.
yeah. That's good.
He drinks because of his like injury, but he drinks more because like everything's been taken away from him. And then he like, I think Molly scrutiny, and then him just realizing this is not a healthy way to, like, live my life is what makes him stop. Because he could have drank himself to death if he wanted, like, with all of the, like, horrible things that has been happening to him in the past, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months.
I really think that he would have if, like, Fitz had truly, I mean, he does truly die, but if they hadn't been able to, like, bring him back, and if he hadn't had Molly and Nettle to focus on, I think he would have just drank himself to death.
Because at that point, he lost everything. Like, he, like, broke his promise to his king to protect his son. Like,
yeah. And I think he would hate Regal, but I think that he's too proud to do anything that would be, like, treasonous. So I think he would just sit in a cabin and drink until he died.
Birch is like, the guard shouldn't have left us here. He's relying on our honor that we won't just ride through. And Fitz is like, well, maybe he just knows you.
Yeah.
Like, the most honorable man in the keep.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like Birch could drink himself to death if he didn't have Molly, but I also feel like the way that we have Birch described is like, he's a type of person who will always find a purpose or something to keep living for.
Yeah.
And so, like, if not killing Regal, then supporting patients in, like, keeping Buck afloat, you know? Keeping, like, yeah. I feel like he would find some purpose. And actually, that makes me think of, like, an interesting parallel where it's like, Shade is also all about, like, faith and purpose. I think that if I wanted to, like, put on my, like, college writing cap again and, like, do an essay about this, I think, like, tracking that thing of, like, faith as a motif throughout would be really interesting. I don't know if motif would be the proper literary term. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, well, Birch does have that line where he says, like, you drink and you kind of just go throughout your day, and then eventually you realize that whatever you thought would kill you didn't kill you. And I think that would probably be how he went about his life. Like, if Fitz actually had died, he'd be like, just drink until he realized that he's got to just continue.
Hmm. And he loves Fitz so much. Like even though Birch is the one to warn Fitz at the start, like, don't act too much like chivalry. You'll expose yourself. Like, when the guard is like, the bastard, he's like, say Fitz. Chivalry, son of chivalry. Like, he is in his boy's corner, and you love to see it. I know.
That was so strong. And, like, I think that Birch probably shouldn't have done that, but I love the fact that he did do it.
Mm-hmm. He would not be himself if he didn't.
No.
I guess while we're still on Birch, like, there's a line where it says, his lame legs seemed forgotten tonight. And they mentioned this last book as well when he was, like, going to, like, beat Galen's ass. And I kind of wonder if, like, it could just be adrenaline, but I also wonder if, like, some of his leg injury is, like, psychosomatic, where it's, like, I could very much see it, like, being connected to his feelings of failure, given, like, how similar in time. So he kind of just, like, internalized that feeling of, like, I am a cripple or whatever. Where it's like,
yeah, exactly what happened with Fitz at the beginning of this book,
where it exacerbates the extent to which his injury, like, prevents him from doing stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. Because he seems to fight just fine in, like, battles and everything. Mm-hmm. And then, like, obviously it starts acting up. But I think that he lets it rule his life a little bit more than it needs to.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I guess before we get into, like, the actual events of the rest of the chapter, it was only, like, this chapter where I realized how fucking on the nose Foxglove's name is. It's like, yeah, you know, the second in command to the Vixen Queen, the Foxglove, and it's just like, okay.
There is another mention of the white ship in this chapter, and I completely forgot that it turns up more than once.
Same.
And no one can see it. but Fitz. And even Fitz only, like, sees it at first, and then Burrich is like, oh, that's a fog bank. And when he looks back, it's not there anymore.
Which, like, since the last time, they probably became aware, and or like the pill one is like, okay, we gotta figure this. I also because there's also the mention where it's like, even to think of the white chip brought a shudder over me and a pressure in my head, like the beginning of pain, like the beginning of a skill headache.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely skill related. I'm still so interested in the white chip. I know we talked about it like when it came up the first time, but like I really want to know. There's theories and things that like are more likely than other things, but I want to know for sure what it is and how it's there and what it's doing.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where like you expect that like when they go to Oslavjal, like the white ship will just be like hanging out there, and then it'll be like, and then they'll be like, that's the ship that I saw so many years ago. But then like, no,
Right.
sorry. But yeah, so when the actual fighting starts, there's a line which will live it like this section just like lives in my head rent free, where like Kettricken is like, get to where the fighting is, and then we're just like, it's here, my lady, and then like cut someone's arm off, and it's such like a viscerally good way of just like conveying to the reader the same sort of like suddenness or like, oh man, this is happening, because like we don't have any like sight range until like they tell us, until like Hobb tells us something. So to have that be like the first image we have to like kind of like gauge where the attackers are is a really cool tool for having it feel just as sudden as it must have been for like Fitz and everyone.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that Kettricken is barefoot also shows like how fast it happened. Like she didn't even have the time to put any boots on or anything. Like
Yeah.
as a person that grew up in a winter climate, I cannot fathom the idea of being barefoot for even like more than a minute outside, and she was just fully fighting barefoot on the frozen ground. Like, jeez.
For me, it's the opposite, where it's like I cannot fathom being like the barefoot, because I grew up in India, and if you went out barefoot, you would simply just sizzle the bottom of your foot off. So,
I guess I'm in that happy medium where like going out barefoot a good amount of the time like isn't that bad.
Yeah.
lucky.
In the summer, here it's too hot and you'll burn your feet, and then in the winter it's too cold and you'll freeze your feet. I live in a land of extremes.
Yeah, I've melted like slippers before when I've like
Holy
taken them out.
shit.
Yeah,
Wow.
Dang.
Yeah, either way, she did not have time to put shoes on. And, like, if you had any amount of time and you were in that environment, the first thing you do would be put shoes on. So it shows, like, how fast it happened.
Yeah.
And how much of a badass she is.
Oh my god. Fitz
Yeah, I didn't
noticed
pick up on.
you.
Oh yeah,
He said her grace made a deadly dance of the battle that would have distracted me at any other time, and I'm like, Fitz, that's leader's mate. You can't do that.
Leader's mate.
I loved it so much that I was like, yes. Get a little distracted. Look at her.
y'all are salacious. Oh yeah, and she's also like, I didn't realize like, I always imagined Kettricken just like having like a normal weapon, but she says like she's two-handing a ridiculously long mountain sword. I'm like, fucking Sephiroth ass motherfucker, looking like some like anime character out here with a big ass sword. Like, huh? Like I never put that together. That's crazy.
And she is like, she's good, like sturdily built. At least that's what Fitz tells us in the first book.
And she's like
She's
tall,
like this
right? She's like,
sturdy woman. So like it kind of makes sense that she's got this really big weapon because she gained the muscles to like wield this.
yeah, and with like being tall, she has the reach to just like make it even more effective.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because like I'm wondering, like, how did she keep up that muscle definition when she's just, like, sitting inside all the time? I feel like
Well, you know
I feel like
she
Fitz just catches her meditating, and then other times she's just, like, doing push-ups in the corner.
Well, you know that she's like lifting all of those heavy pots in the Queen's Garden, and she goes out there in the winter too.
Oh, yeah,
So
the
she's like
statues and stuff.
moving stuff around. I'm sure she like uses, it's probably like using different muscles, but it's still like exercising her muscles enough that she doesn't lose what she's got.
Yeah, I feel like lifting statues probably, like, uses all of your major muscle groups. I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, no wonder there are songs written about her, and she's all oh, yeah, and, like, all of this would be impressive without and she's also pregnant, and it's just like, "Oh, okay, cool," you know?
Wild.
Oh, yeah, they mention so, like wait, is there anything else, like, during the battle that we wanna mention?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so, like, one of the first things they mention after the battle is, like, the Fitz is like, "Hey, so what about the coterie member?" And then, like, Kelvar I don't know if it's Kevlar or Kelvar, is like, Burl was recalled to Tradeford," and I feel like the timing of this, to me, makes me feel like it shows that Regal is explicitly working with the Pale Woman by this point, like, trafficking the skill scrolls, because
Mhm.
it feels like too convenient of a timing. And I think that also makes me think that, like, maybe that's why Regal isn't scared of ceding the coastal duchies, because the Pale Woman has probably been like, "Yeah, you know what? Just let us take this. We'll give you all the riches you need to become king. We'll leave you alone in Tradeford." And he's probably gullible enough for being skilled that, like, he's like, "Yeah, for sure, you can have all of this, and you definitely won't attack me in the inland."
Yeah, I think that's a good theory. It would make sense, and like we see Regal be so short-sighted and like seemingly stupid, but then at the same time we see him make these like masterful court manipulations that it's like maybe he's not as stupid. And if he's making this deal, then that would make sense because Shade's like, well, wouldn't he just know that without trade, the inland duchies, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, anyone not making a deal with somebody would know that, but maybe there's something else going on. Likely something else going on.
Yeah, something I noticed was how synonymous the term Out Islander has become with Red Ship Raider. Because I feel like at the beginning, it was always the Raiders, the Raiders, the Raiders. And now even Fitz in his internal monologue swaps between the two terms like they're the same thing. And he should know more than anything that they're not if he's got like Out Islander like immigrants.
Yeah, he had to work with them when he was rowing on the Constance.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pick up on that, but that's really good. It shows like the shift in like collective thought among Six Duchies people.
Yeah.
It
And
really
how
sad.
how far Kettricken has to go to get over that in Tawny Man. Because
Mhm.
it's like ingrained so deeply in the Six Duchies people that like Out Islander equals Raider.
Raider, yeah.
Right.
Also, like, Fitz bringing Nighteyes along for this battle is, I think, like, the biggest mistake he makes in this book, which is saying a lot. Like, it basically just, like, it solidifies the witch rumors around him, and without the witch rumors, Regal couldn't have as cleanly and effectively disposed of him.
It is a mistake, but at the same time, I don't know that Fitz would have survived this battle without him. So it's like, if he didn't take him, maybe he would have just died, and that's the end of everything. So, like, taking him helped keep him alive, but it also. He was just messy about it. Like, he gets so in depth with the wit that he, like, doesn't even realize what he's done until afterwards. And it's like, you could have been a little bit more,
Circumspect.
right. like, I think I have it in my note in the next chapter, but, like, for as wrong as Burrich is with the way he thinks and feels about the wit, like, I really wish Fitz would heed his warnings a little bit more about, like, not making it so obvious. Like, don't just chill out with your wolf by a well after a battle when you're both, like, covered in blood.
And then, like,
And
when someone
raise
comes
your
over, just be like,
axe
yo,
to a
what's
little
up?
girl.
Yeah.
Are you kidding
Right.
me? Do not raise your axe, your weapon, to a child.
Right.
Because
Like,
that's not scary enough. I think also, you guys aren't giving Nighteyes credit because even if Fitz was like, no, stay home, he would not have listened. He would have come
That's
along
true.
anyways.
Fitz does
So
not
there's
tell him,
no
like,
way.
we're going. Nighteyes just goes.
That's fair.
There's no way that I don't think there's any situation unless you locked Nighteyes up that he wouldn't have come with Fitz.
Especially when Fitz has not gotten to see him in so long.
And miss all the action? Like, you can't leave him bored at home to chase the
Dogs
mice.
need to get walked.
I can't wait till we get to the part where Fitz is just trying to call Nighteyes his dog. It's so funny.
That's a big dog. It kind of looks like a wolf. No, my dog.
This is my dog.
I'm just every time he like says dog, I'm imagining it's in like that voice where like they like dub it over.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, my dog. I love
An
going hunting
automated
with my
voice.
dog.
Trying to block out the swears.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my last note here, and something that I like didn't pick up on previous reads, is I love to see Lady Grace and her little dog too thriving, but the end of the chapter where like she's giving him the bone, and like it says she gave it to me on a dark evening when the lights of Duke Kelvar's watchtowers glittered like diamonds against the black sky, and I'm like, fucking callback to when like the Fitz was like, make the watchtowers your diamonds, and like I completely forgot that like that actually comes back and is relevant because without the watchtowers, Neat Bay probably would have lost way more people probably.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
I
just like
noted
a
that line
beautiful.
too. Because didn't he take that metaphor from chivalry initially too?
He
It's
did.
like hearkening back not only to the first book, but to like his father's metaphor that he used. I didn't notice that on my first two reads either, but I was like, oh, that's so cool that she pulls the exact line. Like,
For someone who never knew his father, I feel like Fitz picks up so much of what chivalry did and said and kind of adopts it into himself. And I don't know if that's like subconscious because he like wants to be close to his dad in any way that he can, or if it's just like, this is a good line, I'm gonna keep it.
It's like 50-50. Part of it is just like he is who he is, like when he's like ordering around the guards. He didn't like get that from anywhere. He just like inherently has, in fact, like they tried to like squish the instinct to lead out of him. And then there's stuff where it's just like he like picks up stuff from like the adults in his life, like Shade, Burrich, Patience, and it just kind of like also unconsciously becomes part of him.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times he's just repeating what the adults in his life have said, and they happen to have been repeating things his father said.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I lied. I do have one more note. So way earlier, when Shade is like telling Fitz to go and warn Shrewd, Fitz is like, "Well, what do I tell him?" And then Shade is like, "Tell Shrewd you had a dream of the pocked man scrying it in a pool of water," which, if you're reading this book, you think is just like a fanciful way to like let Shrewd know that it's Shade. But later on, we know that Shade actually that's literally what happened because the only way Shade could have known, because it takes like 2 days hard riding to
Mm-hmm.
like get from Neat Bay. So like Shade had to have actually scrying it.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of scrying and skilling, because I feel like scrying is like a lesser version of skilling, almost, sort of. Some random thought that I had while I was reading was like a connection between the skill and the wit. And I feel like the skill could have been like an elevated version of the wit that like branched off when people like generations, like forever ago, back in the Stone Age or whatever. And since the wit lets you communicate with animals, and like even at a far distance between like Nighteyes and Fitz, they can go miles and still communicate with each other. What if the skill kind of developed from people using the wit to communicate with each other like that? And then it kind of just branched off because they started it kind of both of the people had to be witted. And then throughout the generations, it kind of just refined and like evolution made it into the skill.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good theory because Fitz mentions, I think, in the last book that the wit is far older. So that would make sense, like, timeline-wise.
But I
But
think
you
that
think...
I think he only thinks that the wit is older because he doesn't like at that time we don't know that the dragon's skill, right? Because he assumes that the genesis of skilling is the when like the Six Duchies was founded, essentially. The like adjacent to that, I think it's kind of funny how like the skill is seen as like this refined human magic, and then like the wit is like dumb animal magic. When like the wit was the magic of the humans way before, like how they communicated with animals, and the skill basically it's implied to like directly come from dragons or like dragon interaction type stuff. So it's like it got like flipped in history along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in general, I think like I need to go. I keep like half referencing this like thing in one of the chapter intros in Tawny Man. They talk about like the circle of magic, and I feel like the way they talk about it um, makes me think that like there isn't so much separating the magics as like people of this time are led to believe, and it's just sort of like how it's evolved over time. Yeah, like I could definitely see like a singular starting point. So, is there anything else for this chapter?
Not for me.
Okay, so chapter 25, Buckkeep, which, yeah, it's basically their return home. And I don't even know if I can describe this chapter. This is just like my least favorite chapter. Like, not because it's badly written, but because it's just so painful to read, especially after how satisfying Neat Bay as a chapter ends up being in like all ways.
Yeah, it's like
So,
they get, as soon as they get home from this victory, and they're feeling up and the reader's feeling up because you're like, finally they have a win. And as soon as they get back, they get word that Verity's dead. I remember the first time I read this, my heart like dropped into my stomach and I was like, oh my god. Like, Regal's gonna kill Fitz. And I thought Verity was actually dead. And it was like, it's just terrible.
Yeah, I think we all thought that Verity was dead, especially like the way that Kettricken was and everything.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if this is a hint or not, but I feel like usually when they have like big events like that, Hobb puts something in the chapter intro to like parallel it or something, and the fact that she didn't here is kind of like, yeah, you know, it also makes it a lot more like impactful when it hits. But
It's
yeah,
shocking. Yeah, like you don't expect it at all. But then once Fitz starts thinking about it, it's like so obvious that he's likely not dead.
hmm
So you get like whiplash as a reader.
Yeah.
Speaking of the intro is all about how like Tradeford is so great, and Queen Desire thought it would be a better capital, and Regal finally managed to like fulfill that ambition in this chapter by being like, hey, yeah, we're moving the capital to Tradeford. And it's like you have to imagine that like because obviously so much of Regal's mindset is because he was like essentially like mentally poisoned by Queen Desire, and you have to imagine that like he heard the same stories that are echoed in the intro, that like Tradeford is this amazing place with like a river that is so calm that you can easily go on it with beautiful plains, and we see that like it's true, like in Assassin's Quest, like that like it really is this beautiful idyllic place, and Buck
Well,
is kind of just like a literal backwater.
it says he spent his summers there growing up too. Like
Yeah,
Queen
his
Desire
childhood.
would take Regal with her and they would spend summers there. So like
You know,
you can
all his best
understand,
memories happen there.
right, you can understand like once you have control of where you live being like, I want to go live where I spent my happy childhood summers with my mom and like the beautiful place instead of this like cold
Drafty.
castle. Yeah, exactly.
Like Fitz gasses up Bucky because it's the only place he's ever known, but like we find out in Tawny Man that like, wow,
It's terrible.
It's like we trash.
yeah,
But also, like, I think that Bucky being cold and drafty and stuff probably reminds him, maybe subconsciously, of his like mountain home. So like
and the
he's like,
austerity as well.
actually nice. It's not bad.
Right.
One thing before they actually return back is Fitz has like a dream of Molly, and like she runs away from him, and then he's like, I awoke feeling strangely glad she outran me, and I'm like, man, if only waking Fitz could be like this okay with like letting go of Molly, because
Mhm.
like goddamn, he doesn't do that for like 6
Ever.
books, yeah, ever. It's like the first like mature and cogent moment that Fitz has regarding their relationship, and it comes in a fucking dream. Like his subconscious is like knock knock, and he's like, I hear nothing.
Yeah.
In true Fitz fashion.
Mm-hmm.
He also, speaking of Molly, when he's like trying to get information out of Cook about like the attitude around like the situation and Verity's death and Kettricken's pregnancy and whatnot, he says, Queen Kettricken is not the only one with child. I had no idea who might be pregnant, but it was safe to say that someone in the keep was or would be in time to substantiate my rumor. And it's like, Fitz, you're doing sex all the time. Why doesn't it occur to you?
I noted that same line and I said Fitz seems to be just as prophetic as the fool without knowing it at times. Like,
Literally, yeah.
because I feel like this isn't even the first time that Fitz has said something that has been so true without even knowing it. Like, I think he did it in like the last book for something and we noted it too. And just the way
you could
that he,
also
like,
say the Watchtower line
yeah,
was prophetic in some senses. And
Yeah.
like he
yeah.
was aping the fool's like ostentatious way of like saying it. But I mean, yeah, like ended up actually being true, buddy.
Fitz should definitely try and be a white prophet at some point because he's clearly quite good at it.
Well, it
I mean,
makes
I feel
sense
like he'd
that
be a
his
better white prophet than
child-
Catalyst, given how passive he is 90% of the time.
Right.
It's just him needing to stay alive is the fact that he's a catalyst.
Oh yeah, another like strangely prophetic thing. Fitz is like, once Regal was in power, I had no doubt there would be assassins ready to do his bidding. Perhaps there already were some. And just like looks directly into the camera like I'm on The Office. Like, uh-huh. Yeah. And it's just like Rosemary like skipping around like tee hee, time to put some tar grease on the stairs.
Well, and in this chapter when like the cook is making stuff, we see like some of the little things that she sprinkles into her food, and there was like a sentence that said like she sprinkled blah 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 and sage and whatever, and it was a period, and then it was and rosemary period, and I'm like, is she trying to drop hints at us?
Wait,
I did
really?
not pick up on that at all, but I bet
It's
that was
talking
totally
about
a hint.
the treachery, like it's just like such a drastic change from the cook that we, I think, know. And then the fact that she's like, praising Regal so much and then also like added Rosemary, but like in its own sentence. I was like,
Yep.
what? It was definitely.
Once you know that Rosemary is a spy, like I remember not thinking anything about her my first read. Like I didn't pick up on it at all. But once you know it, it's so obvious. Like in the next chapter when they're in Shrewd's room and it says Kettricken was there with Rosemary, and then all of a sudden Regal comes in and Rosemary's with him.
Yeah, she
It's like-
runs to her side.
It's so obvious, like so obvious that she
And-
ran and got Regal.
It's
Yeah.
the
And no
only,
one
like, side
notices.
character who is name dropped and mentioned every single time, and it's just
Every
like,
time.
And the first time we read it, I felt so blindsided, just like Fitz. I'm like, how could this happen?
Me too.
But now I'm like, I know. I see you, Rosemary. You're not sneaky anymore. Even though you totally tricked me the first time.
and it's such a smart way of doing it, because it's like who would suspect a child? Exactly why they picked Fitz.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Shade's like downfall is that I don't think he really believes anyone is as crafty and clever as he is. So I don't think it occurs to him that like someone else would use a child as a spy.
Yeah.
He's just like, this is my special brilliant idea. Like,
Yeah. I could see that.
I mean, you can echo exactly what he said to Fitz back at him. For someone so perceptive, you have some very odd blind spots.
yep. 100%. The end of this chapter is like so infuriating too with Regal, and like if Shade had been watching that, it's like, are you gonna open your eyes yet and see what's happening with Regal? Are you gonna stop pretending things are fine?
Yeah, I hated it.
The conversation with Cook Sarah and the ending feast, like, I don't even have anything like coherent to say about them. They just make me mad.
They're
Like,
just so
same.
infuriating. Like the fact that we as readers get to see how incredible and badass Kettricken is, and like she's a hero. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like she's a hero. She's amazing. And then just with like a few phrases and a few like whatever, the court thinks she's like reckless, and Regal just completely diminishes what she's done and her as a person to nothing more than like a joke, and he calls her a breeding female, which is like,
well, he doesn't call her that, but then Fitz is like picking up
He's reduced her to.
oh,
yeah,
okay. I pulled out the words, but I don't have my book here, so I couldn't.
It always makes my skin crawl, but like it's basically like Fitz is like, yeah, that's what he's implying.
That's what he's saying.
So,
yeah. The misogyny of it all, it's like painful.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's like Regal gets all of his Regal reveres his mom, right? And it's like you would think that perhaps you would not have this trait, like you would still be an asshole, but maybe you would you would have some respect women juice because your mom shaped your entire life.
It's very Norman Bates of him.
I also think that it's like he views Kettricken as a threat. And so any threat, like there's no limit that he will go to kind of get rid of anything that he views as a threat. So regardless of if he respects her as a person, it's like she's threatening his kind of title to the throne. So she's got to go.
I'm not actually sexist. I'm just utilitarian sexist. Thank you very much.
Well, he does the same thing to Verity too. Like he diminishes Verity in any way he can, and kind of makes his whole quest a joke too. Like, oh, he ran off to see the Elderlings. He's an idiot.
Regal doesn't discriminate when it is a threat, for sure.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of him not discriminating, I think, the idea that the Fool brings up here of, Regal hating Shrewd because he believes that Shrewd killed Queen Desire is like such like a tragic angle, because it's like it's not just that like Regal is callous or like just is like wants to take the throne because he wants power. He like actively hates his own father, who loves Regal so much that he's blind to everything about him. It's just like
Yeah, it's like I believe that Regal thinks Shrewd and Fitz and Shade had a hand in killing his mother. Like, and he's just so hell-bent on like a power, greed, and revenge. And it's like you kind of can't blame him in some respect, because if I thought someone killed my mom, I would probably be equally as hateful towards them. But I also wouldn't like bring a kingdom down just to have revenge.
Well, and like he feels like he lost the only parent he had and the only person who like probably truly loves him or loved him. So
Right.
he like lost everything when his mom died.
And then
Which
Galen
is no
dies
excuse for what he
too.
did, though.
Another line from that I called out here was like the fool being like, all I'm asking of you is to forgo your twirling, Sir Spoon, to let things settle. And Fitz is like, I cannot. I think that's one of the most like telling lines for me as to like why Fitz is a catalyst, is because like he just has like this like inertia and momentum, and he just like can't stop things once they happen. He like he's passive, but then that makes like the actions he takes as a result of like that growing momentum that he allows to happen, so that much more meaningful. Also, I just love just calling Fitz Sir Spoon, and that's going to be my official nickname for him.
That was cute.
Mm-hmm. I wish it came back more. Like I feel like that could be a fun nickname.
Yeah.
Sir Spoon.
I feel like this is the first time that we kind of see a little glimpse into like the different personas that the fool can put on, because he like not only does he look so different right now because he's trying to appease Regal so that he can go to Tradeford with the king, but he also isn't like, I feel like he's less jesty and like less kind of riddly when he's talking to Fitz right there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of just like a little hint as to what we're gonna see in the later trilogies of like the different faces that the
Versions.
fool can wear.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. This is my. I really need you to understand this because you were too stupid to get it otherwise. Face.
Yeah.
Right.
Do not kill my king.
Mm-hmm. It just straight up says, "You shall be the death of kings." Yeah.
He will, but he'll also be the birth of kings too, so
Yep.
come on, fool, give him some credit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Fitz is like, he's clearing the road for what needs to come forward. So like, yes, he's the death of kings, but it is almost a necessary thing.
Yeah, it feels like almost everything that happens at the end of this book only goes wrong as a result of timing. Like Shrewd dying when Regal's consolidating his power and Verity is gone. If Shrewd had died earlier in the book, no harm, no foul. Fitz finally acting and taking action against Regal. Would have been good if he hadn't already like hemorrhaged all of his allies and driven his own reputation to the dust. So on and so forth.
If he had killed Justin and Serene earlier and not in front of the whole court with a knife.
Mm. Like again, if he'd just been active and made these changes earlier, so much could have been different. Which is also why I think the end of this chapter is so satisfying. Just like Burrich and Fitz being in perfect sync, just like turning to each other and being like, okay, we got to do something.
Yeah, I love that all they had to do was share a look. Like, they didn't have to say anything. They just knew it's time, let's go.
And like they knew to look at each other. I've had friends like that in the past where like something will happen and then you know that they're thinking something, so you just like look at them and they're looking at you, and it's like, yeah. Because usually those are more positive than like we must go save our kingdom, but you know.
Right.
We must almost
principle.
accidentally kill the king.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is there anything else from this chapter? Okay, so the last chapter of this section, chapter 26, skilling. Okay, so like you said earlier, I was totally like worried that like, oh my god, are we already here? Because I didn't remember that they skilled to Verity like once before Fitz tries to like skill through him again. So I'm like, oh my god, is this happening? Is this where he's actually just straight up going to die? So like going into this chapter, I was like freaking out, and then it's like, oh, okay, no, never mind. False alarm.
Not yet.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, basically that's what happens this chapter. Fitz skills through Shrewd to Verity, finds out that Verity is alive, but the consequences of playing his hand a little bit early kind of manifest themselves.
We see Will as more of a threat in this one because he starts kind of haunting Fitz all the time. Yeah. And Nighteyes warns him the first time because he's going to go to Molly's room. And then this is like one of my favorite, well, not one of my favorite lines from Nighteyes, but just like a line that I love from Nighteyes where Fitz says, "How will I ever thank you?" Because he warns him that someone's following him. And Nighteyes says, "Stay alive," a pause, "and bring me ginger cake."
I loved that so much.
I just love Nighteyes so much. I'm not ready for him to go away.
Adding ginger cakes to the list of like food we're gonna have to cook. It's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, speaking of Will, like I love how they like build up Will as like this threat to Fitz like so quickly and so like potently. Like just the fact that like yeah, it's just like the paranoia he inflicts on Fitz. They have not interacted yet. And even then, like directly interacted, but like even then it's like the most threatening person that Fitz has had to face this entire series. Like I love Will as an antagonist because it's finally like Regal, you hate him, but then he doesn't have that like level of like competency that makes you like fear him as much. Will is like all business.
And they build him up to that point so subtly and so slowly that like you don't even notice him, and then all of a sudden you're terrified of him.
Which exactly how Fitz feels, which
right.
Thank you, Hobb. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, also speaking of the skill, they have like in the intro of this chapter talking about like they parallel the skill and being forged, which I thought was really interesting because it's kind of like the first hint at like, okay, what could forging be? It's also interesting because it kind of like highlights a thing of like being dead to the skill and the wit like brings this like implies the skill and the wit kind of like function on like a similar wavelength, and so adds to that theory of like maybe the magics are closer than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
A line that made me sad here is like, "It was the first and last time I would ever use force against the fool. I took no joy in proving that I was physically stronger than he was. The look in his eyes as I forced him aside was something no one should ever see in a friend's face."
I know, that was rough. And then the fact that, like, a little bit later on in that little scene, the fool has to, like, stand on his tippy toes and stuff to look Fitz in the eye just shows how small and, like, how much Fitz has grown.
It's true what Fitz says later, where he's like, "I have not been doing our friendship much justice."
Yeah.
it shows like where their relationship is at this point, because at the very end of this chapter the fool blatantly threatens him too. He's like, I will tell every one of your secrets if you don't let me go with the king. And he means it 100% for sure, and he's like ruthless with his like willingness to like throw Fitz under the bus.
Yeah.
For Shrewd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love like that comes right after Shade. Was it Shade or Burrich? I think it's Shade. Yeah, I don't think you will ever completely trust anyone or believe that someone cares about you, which like bars Fitz never really does. But like,
Yeah.
even the fool who's like basically the closest person to Fitz, like betrays him. Like this would give me trust issues for life if someone was like, "Hey, I know you told me all these things in confidence. I will use them as a bargaining chip against you."
Well, I feel like also Fitz doesn't even tell the fool things. The fool just knows.
Yeah,
so
like he never tells the fool
secrets...
about Molly, and the fool knows.
So like, what secrets does the fool know of Fitz that Fitz doesn't even know that the fool knows that the fool's gonna reveal? That was a lot of confusion. I could write it out, but I actually don't think that I could. Sorry.
It was your own riddle.
Yes.
Like the fool.
And it was just me repeating the fool and Fitz's name multiple times.
Going back to that line that Shade says, I pulled that line out too, where he's like, I don't think you'll ever completely trust anyone or believe someone cares about you. And I was just like, Shade, I wonder why. It's almost like both your parents abandoning you and then your only friend and mentor and your grandfather conspire to test you when you're like 10 until you get physically sick.
Surprised that like it Fitz didn't just like glance over to the knife in that moment.
I know, I would have stared directly at it. I would have gone up and leaned up against it. I think you're right.
I wonder why.
So yeah, speaking of Shade as well, it was interesting that he refers to Fitz as Catalyst, because I don't think that because he obviously doesn't know it from the Fool, so which makes me think that like Shade must have been at Fitz's man ceremony, because how else would he know to call Fitz Catalyst with a capital C?
Oh yeah, maybe.
I forgot about the man ceremony again already.
Me too.
I mean, literally, so many important things just happen in chapter intros, and like I feel like the book kind of like trains you to like not pay attention to chapter intros until you're like rereading it, and even then, it's like, where did that show up? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I guess like jumping back early in the chapter, one part that just made me like laugh so much was like Burrich literally being like, "Damn, bitch, you live like this," just like and I think that like his note that like it's as if you've never expected to stay here more than a night or two is pretty astute, because even before like Girl on a Dragon happened, even before like Nighteyes, like Fitz never believed that like he would have a future of his own beyond like serving the monarchy, so he never like commits to his own future in any meaningful capacity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think also Fitz never truly has a place to call his own, because even his room isn't his own, because it's always been like Shade has access to it. The Fool sneaks in all the time. Like his locks aren't that good, and even when they are good, he sees like Serene and Justin come sniffing about. So I think that like if he had a room that was like solely his own, kind of like Verity's study or something like that, then it would have been different and he would have kind of been able to open it up. But at the same time, like he probably takes what happened to the Fool as a lesson, like that no physical space within the castle is safe and can be claimed as your own, because there's always people, like if they're malicious people, they're going to find a way in and they're going to ruin it. So he like keeps everything so close to his heart that he doesn't allow anything to spill out into the physical world.
Yeah, like even last book, he's like, I wish there was a place I could call as much my own as this place is yours. He says that to the Fool about.
Yeah.
And I think like the only place, like you said, keeping it in his thoughts, I think the only place that kind of fulfills that is like his dream cottage with Molly. But it's
Yeah.
literally, it can only be a dream.
I feel like the only place he ever really feels safe and secure is the stables when he's little, but that's not even his own space. He's living in Burrich's space. And it says he like sleeps in front of the fire. Like he literally is living like a dog.
Yeah.
He doesn't have like his own room and his own bed and his own whatever. He's just like sleeping on probably a cot or something by the fire in Burrich's room.
Do you think that Withywood's becomes like Fitz's dream cottage once he moves in there and like lives there with Molly, or is he always still prepping to like have to be on the run?
I think until Molly dies, it is. But once
There's
Molly
also
dies,
just like
I
a
think.
feeling. I think the way he like describes, from what I'm remembering, like people like because Whitney Woods is like, it's much more than just their home. It's also like a place where there's like minstrels and cooks and all of this stuff. I think that he likes that, but it's also sort of this thing where like he would love to just be like alone in the woods in a cabin kind of thing. So.
His wolf, his girl, and himself, and that's it.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, I guess speaking of Wolf and Burrich, hashtag Wolfwatch. There's a part where Burrich gave a bark of laughter and smiled wolfishly.
I saw that too.
I missed that.
And
I'm bad at
right
wolf
after that, hashtag Fool Watch, talking of his choice to go and skill to Verity through the king. Fitz is like, I had been a fool, and it's like, well, actually, you did the exact opposite of what the fool wanted you to do. But sure.
Nice try, Fitz.
Mm. And I think the last note I had was Shade talking about himself and Shrewd. We are two old men who have grown old together. Sometimes that is a greater closeness. It is like being two foreigners trapped in a land we have come to, unable to return to our own, and having only each other to confirm the reality of the place we once lived. Which, like, on like, it's really sad on like obviously like the surface level, but also like it got me thinking about like, this feels like it reminds me of like towards the ending of Fitz and the Fool. Am I crazy? Like just the way they describe it.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're right.
Okay. Because like I don't remember enough to know if like that's exactly how it goes down, but I'm like, yeah, that seems close enough. And also like it feels like especially towards the end of towards like the last trilogy in general, it's all about like aging and dealing with that becomes like a huge theme, even more so than like it already is in the first two trilogies.
Yeah. I think the last note that I had for this chapter was something that like made me actually laugh out loud. And it was when Fitz is on the steps like trying to investigate and the Fool scares the shit out of him and he's like pinwheeling his arms to not fall down the stairs. And the Fool is just like, interesting. Do you think you could teach me to do that? And I laughed out loud. I was like, oh my god, this is too funny.
I love him.
I know, the Fool makes me crack up. Like, I wish the Fool was my friend just so that I could hear them talk, like, all the time. Just come and talk to me. Like, I don't care what you say. I just want to watch you and, like, listen.
Yeah, like the Fool would be, like, an amazing best friend. Like, we kind of see it at the feast where it's just, like, it's all, like, Fitz is talking about how, like, the Fool was like punctuating Regal's conversation to make it sound wittier than it was. Like I need me that. Get me someone to make me seem cooler than I am. Thank you
Make
very
me seem
much.
smart and funny.
The ultimate wing person.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Fool.
Actually, that's Timara. Thank you very much.
Mm,
See, I've read enough to
Yeah.
be able to make that joke. Let's go.
that was good.
The Fool is like the best sense of humor in this series. Nighteyes, I think, is equally as funny, but Nighteyes isn't trying to be funny. Nighteyes
Yeah.
is just being himself.
Well, Nighteyes does like want to be funny sometimes, but it's a lot more like muted. It's a lot more
It's
like
like a
subtle.
dry. Yeah, it's like a really dry.
Mhm.
I think
sense of
wolf
humor.
humor is different than human humor. So
Yes.
like
Mhm.
Nighteyes is probably like so funny among the wolves, and like he's funny among us. But I feel like it takes him more effort to be funny because he's got to like put it into human language.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, but thank God that we have both of them. Thank Rob and Hobb that we have both of them, because without Nighteyes and the Fool being like some comedic stuff, like this whole thing
This
would
would
be
be-
so much more depressing than it already is. And it's
It
so
would be
depressing as it
unbearable.
is.
Mhm.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would be unbearable without those two. Like,
Definitely.
I think Robin Hobb is a comedic genius because I do not. The Fool is so witty, it seems otherworldly, but it came out of her head.
I know, like what the heck? It's incredible. She's
It really
amazing.
is.
And again, I have to imagine that Hobb like had a friend like this, and that probably like inspire, or like maybe not a single friend, but a bunch of people who are just like, you hear something and you're like, you just like hold on to it in your mind. You're like, that's really funny. I should like put that in, because I definitely know I've had like friends make jokes or like just say something where I'm like, I will be remembering that for the rest of my life, and I'm going to totally use that myself sometime.
I feel like I can see Hobb being that witty person. Like I can
Mhm.
totally see her saying these things or like coming up with something on the spot that's like super witty and funny. Like
Right.
Mhm.
I can just totally see that being like part of her.
Personality.
Yeah.
For sure.
I did not have anything else for this chapter.
Same.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, on
Is
that
there-
happy note, one step closer to the next book when we don't have, when there's a period when we don't have the Fool or Nighteyes. So you know,
Yay.
if you thought it couldn't get any more depressing, no.
Great.
Section finishing this book?
Yeah, I think next episode, by going by normal chapter numberings, we would get up to chapter 31, but that would only leave us with 2 chapters, and the last 2 chapters are the shortest in the book,
For sure.
anyways. So I think we can just say next episode we'll make it a little bit longer and just finish off the book right there.
And if we have like too much to say about what's going on, we'll just cut it into 2 episodes. But
Yeah, I imagine we won't, because we're also going to be glossing over the torture chapters. So
yeah.
Yeah, we'll all be like, let's pull a Fitz and pretend this doesn't exist.
There will be just
Chapter-
empty notes. Like
Yeah.
it's just one bullet point that's blank, and then it goes on to the next chapter. And we're like, okay, let's
Yeah.
go.
Chapter 30, tortures. Fitz gets tortured. Okay, hey, does anyone else have any other notes for this chapter? No? Okay, cool.
Okay.
But yeah, so thanks everyone for watching and suffering along with us. We hope you'll join
Just
us
gets worse.
next week for the horrible conclusion to this book. And then the week after that, we'll be doing a whole book recap, like we did and it'll be a live show, just like we did for Assassin's Apprentice. And then after that, we'll be doing, or we'll be starting the final book in this trilogy, Assassin's Quest, which is super exciting. Yeah. Yeah. Until next time. See ya.
Bye.